Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Quizzing Cameron. If you have any management and leadership questions that come to your mind while you're listening to this and watching this video, then go ahead and respond to this video and include your question. I'll make sure it gets on the list to be answered as we go along with these miscellaneous episodes. Our first question, I'm going to dive right in today. Our first question comes from Lisa, and it's what are positive ways to manage high maintenance entitled employees and not burn out? And that's a great way of phrasing that, Lisa, because sometimes our best employees can absolutely drain us with all the things that they want to do, all the energy that they come at you with. And so burnout is actually a very natural response to that. Sometimes if you have a large amount of high performing employees, and that it's what we all want, but sometimes too much of a good thing can be troublesome. So the first thing that I always say with high maintenance, and you use the term entitled employees, but they're expecting things from you. The first thing is empowerment. You want to show them respect. That's what all of your employees want, and especially your best employees want some sort of acknowledgement of their superior performance. And one of the ways to do that is through increasing their levels of empowerment to handle their own issues. You can also throw them into relief supervisory roles or team lead roles, something along those lines, so that you can recognize that and give them the development that they're craving. This also gives you practice in delegating, so it can be good for them and good for you as well in delegating that empowerment, and then also special projects as they come along. Give them the experience to handle those special projects. And that'll hopefully keep them busy, dealing with the empowerment that you've given them, dealing with the special projects that you have for them. But I also recommend treating your best employees a little bit different in a different way. And that is, sometimes people want to spread them out across the department so that they're always available. But I also find that it's very valuable to bring your best together. And they can share best practices, feed off of each other, and actually increase their performance levels even more. So you want to go ahead and put them in an environment where they see their peers, they see how exceptional some of their peers are, and that inspires them to grow even more. So bring them together. If you want, you can go ahead and change that up a little bit. You bring them together, you spread them out, you bring them together, and they can kind of share what they learned in the weeks that have gone by since they were back together again. So tough situation sometimes. Our greatest employees are sometimes some of the most difficult to manage, Lisa. So you're not alone in that, and best of luck to you. Our next question comes from Nazmus, and the question is, should a leader worry about being too blunt or too diplomatic when handling internal issues? It's a fair question, Nazmus, and I think part of it depends on the issue. Certainly the most serious issues, if the company is struggling, if there's an issue with safety, then those issues should be handled bluntly. I think the importance of those warrants not mincing words with it. What I really hope is that you're diplomatic on a day in, day out basis, so that your employees feel encouraged and supported by you, and oftentimes that means a softening and a more diplomatic way of speaking to them. But I think that in general you want to err on the side of bluntness when handling an issue that comes up. You definitely want to pepper in some diplomatic speech to it, so that it goes across well and people don't get on the defensive. But when there's an issue, it's fair to be a little bit more blunt about handling it when it's internal. Now obviously external issues with customers, that sort of thing, you obviously want to be very diplomatic in those, but when you're talking about your own team, I think that it's fair that you err on the side of bluntness, but that happens within a sea of being diplomatic, encouraging, supportive to your team, and then they'll be receptive to that bluntness. So that's my advice, Nazmus. Best of luck. Our next question comes from Anne Marie, and it's, what kinds of things can a manager do to help a team with multiple generations congeal as a unit? And Anne Marie, that's in today's business environment, and probably every business environment over the decades and centuries, This is something that's come up and is something that everybody has had to tackle. And my big advice is to embrace the differences. Those millennials that are absolutely fantastic at Snapchat but don't understand what a cassette recorder is are very good and provide a nice amount of energy. But you also acknowledge on the flip side of it those with more experience and more wisdom to it. So you embrace the differences and you leverage those for what they are particularly good at. The experience on the one side, the energy on the other, the innovation on one side, and the steady wisdom on the other. And that's the best way of doing it. And it's important. It's probably the most important thing that you can do in this situation is to acknowledge and get through to your team that every single one of them brings something to the table. I can't stand having, and I'll go ahead and say I hate having, a team that comes from all the same background with all the same experiences. It's happened very rarely, but in those instances, it's a terrible experience. You don't have anything rounding out the department. And so it's important that everybody has different backgrounds. It's important that everybody brings something to the table. And it's important that you impart that to the team, that you respect that, you acknowledge that, and that's the way that you want it as the leader so that the department can perform to its absolute best ability. Thank you very much, Anne Marie. Our next question comes from Nahla, and it's, how do you handle a great employee who keeps threatening to quit in order to get his way? Nahla, I don't envy you this position. That's a tough spot. I assume that you don't really want this particular employee to leave, hence why they can get away with this behavior. But I don't respond well to threats by any stretch of the imagination, and certainly from somebody who's, working for me, alongside me, and is supposed to be a teammate and supposed to have the best interests and the same goals that I have for the organization. For them to be selfish in this respect is not something that goes over particularly well. So truthfully, I look to pave the exit doors for them to call their bluff. And the first thing that you want to do is you want to learn from him in this particular case. Learn what he knows, learn how he does his job, get the procedures in place for what it is that he does, and set those procedures up. And you can do this over the course of days, weeks, months, but make sure that whatever it is that he's doing that's so indispensable to the organization, there's a procedure and there's a codification to what goes on, to where if he does leave, then you can put somebody in and there's a step-by-step way for them to accomplish what it is that he does. The other thing to do is to make sure that you're caught up on the work. So if it means putting a little bit of pressure on this individual or putting a team around them to get them caught up, you want to be caught up on it. And then the next time that it comes up where he wants to get his way and threatens to quit, tell him he can go whenever he wants. And I'll almost guarantee you he will back off of that threat. And if you keep up on calling that bluff, all of a sudden that will dissipate and go away. I'll be willing to bet it's a bluff. But make sure you've got your ducks in a row before you go that route, because I assume it's a situation where you really don't want this person to leave. And you don't want them to leave, and you can make that clear to them as well. But you're not going to respond to threats either. That's no way to run a business. Anthony brings us our next question, and that is, what do you do when your employer is unwilling to hire, yet the work needs additional employees? And Anthony, welcome to business, is kind of what I have to say. There have been very few organizations that have been staffed what I would consider appropriately. And I'll just step into kind of the business owner mindset briefly so that you understand where your owners are coming from. And that is, it forces prioritization when you have a lack of resources to handle the work. So that's one way of guaranteeing that the most important work gets done, and it gets done in the most efficient, and in this case, cost-efficient way possible. It's not what any of us like to hear, but it is a technique that's used. Also, the hiring of employees is a commitment, and I hope your leadership considers it a commitment. And so you don't want to go through a situation where business is booming and it's really busy and you bring on a whole bunch of people, and then all of a sudden the next quarter it tanks and you have to lay people off. You don't want to be in that situation. I've been in that situation before where I've brought people on and literally had to let them go within 2 months of hiring them because the business had slowed down unexpectedly in this case. But that's one of the reasons that they are so leery on it. How you would handle that situation from an employee is you prioritize. You do exactly what the passive-aggressive management technique they're using is meant to accomplish, and as you prioritize your tasks, and where possible you anticipate. This is where you get the practice of being the manager or the leader of the organization. You anticipate what's coming down the pike, you round up your resources to accomplish the absolute most that you can possibly accomplish with the resources that you have. And if you're prioritizing effectively, you should be able to accomplish pretty much all of the things that are on the main part of that list. But it's a tough spot. Use it. Know that you're not alone, Anthony, because really most organizations run lean as opposed to fat. At least the fat ones don't last too long, it seems. So, best of luck. Our next question comes from Luann and Tracy. They both asked kind of the same question. And it is, I always have questions about micromanaging. What is it and how does it harm employees? Luann, Tracy, I appreciate you fessing up and asking the question. I could tell by the responses that you got to the question that you're not alone, that other people have questions on micromanaging. It's a term we throw out all the time, and it's fair to kind of take a step back and ask what it is. So micromanaging is really where the leader in the organization hovers, for lack of a better word, over the day-to-day work of their employees. They are constantly running around with updates. They are constantly inserting their opinions in what is going on, and they are just knee-deep, waist-deep, neck-deep in the organization and how it is actually functioning. So on a certain level, that might sound like exactly what they're supposed to be doing. But the negative effect of that is first of all, it causes a ton of interruptions. So it interrupts the workflow of what's going on in the organization. But the most important thing that it does, or the most detrimental thing that it does, is it kills the empowerment of the workers in the organization. They don't feel like the leader, trusts them to handle their tasks. They don't feel like they have the ability to grow in the organization because the leader is always taking the final steps in a particular task, or is directing every single step of it. So they can't impart any sort of personality to their work, and that becomes very demoralizing. So it interrupts the workflow, but it also just absolutely destroys empowerment. The third thing that it does is it kills the ability of the leader to actually be a leader. In this case, the leader is a worker. They are a worker who just happens to be running around to a whole bunch of other workers, checking on what they're doing and giving them directives. And they aren't leading the organization. They are not growing individuals. They are not working through people. They are not setting the vision for the organization. They are not working on the big things that they need to as a leader to see that the operation moves forward. If you want the status quo to be in place for a long period of time, then a micromanager can be absolutely fantastic for your organization. But that's not where most places want to take their business, and a micromanager can't free up enough time to think and set the vision for the organization. So I hope that clarifies what micromanagement is, and I really appreciate you asking the question because I think there's a lot of confusion about it. So thank you again. Our last question today comes from Adnan, and it is, some of my team members don't want to go beyond their current scope and expand themselves. How should I let them know the importance of doing that? And it's a good question, Adnan, and I want to qualify it right off the get-go. Those people that are, say, line-level employees or supervisors or managers who don't want to move further up in the organization, that's perfectly fine. There's a number of reasons why an individual might not want to be promoted. Most of those is that they have priorities elsewhere, with family, with other activities that they have outside of work, and so they don't want to invest the time to move up in the organization, and that's perfectly acceptable. And most of us who've been in leadership for a while have had many employees that are like that would be absolutely fantastic managers, but they're not interested. And that's fine. However, what I think you might be getting at is members that don't want to grow and don't want to learn new things. And that's something that we should, as leaders, look to tackle. It's important that even if you don't want to be promoted within an organization, that you're continuing to learn. There's an old adage that if you're not growing, you're dying. And I really feel that is absolutely applicable in the workplace as well. You might not want to be promoted, but your job is going to go stale if you don't learn something new. And that's what you want to impart to these people is we want to use your experience elsewhere. We want to expand into, teach you new things so that you're continuing to grow and you're continuing to learn. We're not asking you to do things outside of work. We're not asking you to put in more hours, but the hours that you're here, we're going to try to expose you to different things, and we think that's going to make you an even better employee and make you a happier employee. And that's what you kind of want to get across to them for these particular individuals who don't see the purpose of growing or learning something new. It's important that they do that because otherwise it's going to have a negative effect on your organization. So, thank you, Adnan. Thank you, everybody, for the questions today. I'm just going to sign out from sunny Las Vegas today, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Thank you.